Welcome one and all to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 227. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the first podcast of October 2023. And first thing I got to say is I'm actually recording this podcast at a slightly later time than I usually do. So I'm going to apologize right now for any background noise, my neighbors, and of course my dog who is right beside me as I record. So hopefully he does not bark. So I want to once again apologize if you do hear things in the background. There isn't too much I can do about it. Partly my fault and bad timing for the most part. But in terms of everything besides what's currently happening right now on this recording, I've had a pretty busy and somewhat stressful week over the last couple of days. It's not been fun. It's been really hard to relax. It's been really hard to do things. And yeah, just doing this podcast was a real flip of the coin because, I really wasn't feeling it. But there was enough things I wanted to talk about on this episode that really spurred me to want to make it, and of course, just to be consistent for the most part. But one of the main things I did do over the last 2 weeks was I played Resident Evil 4, the remake, and the expansion or DLC being Separate Ways, which was originally in the original version of Resident Evil 4, but that was more of a tacked on asset flip and didn't really serve any kind of purpose other than here's more content for the PlayStation 2, because the original the original Resident Evil 4 was on GameCube and was a GameCube exclusive until it basically got ported to every single console known to man. But this is the new revamped new version of Separate Ways where you follow Ada Wong, who is prominently featured in Resident Evil, kind of seeing what she was doing in between the events of the actual main game itself. And I love this DLC. It's far greater and a mass improvement over the original DLC, which once again wasn't anything special, as it really does fill in the blanks, and it kind of is like, oh, she was here and she was doing this and she's the reason why that happened. I do kind of like alternate scenarios and situations like that, and I think the DLC is very well done. It's quite lengthy. It'll take you at about 3 to 5 hours to beat, and I think that's an okay length for in our context, or I guess in our currency, about £8. I think that's all right for an expansion, as well as the fact that the game came with a free update for the Mercenaries mode, giving us, I guess, 2/4 new characters and a new map, which I think was a nice little bonus and incentive. But I really enjoyed this DLC. There were a few things I didn't really like about it. For example, the boss battles I think are way too tough for how little they give you in terms of resources, in that the DLC basically starts and the first thing you do is fight a boss and you have very limited ammo. You have such limited ammo that I honestly thought you were supposed to just die to this boss, like you couldn't beat it. But it turns out, obviously, after my second attempt, you can. I think a lot of people are going to struggle with some of the bosses because, the game really does not give you enough resources to fight them, especially on harder difficulties. And there were a few things that I was surprised that the game doesn't actually address. One of those being when you come to a specific room in the game and you know this room from the original game and there's now a new thing there, and when you see this thing you go, oh gosh, we're gonna have to deal with this thing. And then the cutscene plays where you meet Leon in that room, and then those things are then gone. So I'm not sure what was going on there. I'm not sure if they were trying to, not to spoil anything, scare you, or this was like a cut content thing. It's really bizarre. You have to know the game very well, and I don't want to spoil neither game, as well as the fact that there is a point in the game when you play as Leon when something quite, shocking happens. You're kind of taken aback by this, and anyone who's played the original game will probably go, oh, Ada must have done that. And she doesn't do it in this DLC. So it just makes me wonder, okay, who did that then? It's strange. Maybe they forgot about it. Maybe it never was meant to be Ada who did that. I don't know. Regardless, if you love the remake of Resident Evil 4, you're going to love this DLC. Professional mode is really difficult. I'm actually still struggling to actually beat it on there because of the bosses. On professional, the bosses are basically luck-based. It's rather annoying. But once again, I'd highly recommend it and the game as well. But that was the main thing I mainly wanted to do. I'm stripping over my words right now. That was the main thing I managed to get done over the last few weeks, although I'm in deep with a couple of shows, which I hope to finish in the next coming days. But we have a very small episode for you, as there wasn't really too much in terms of trailers, and I kind of want to move away from just talking about trailers and kind of just more in the sort of encompassing world that is media in general. So the first story we have to talk about is the fact that 90% of all NFTs, which is, I believe, stands for non-fungible tokens, are now reportedly worthless. So according to the reports done by Dapper Gamble, who is a crypto gambling and blockchain reviewer that essentially makes sure whether any kind of cryptocurrency or sort of gambling in regards to this, Web3 blockchain stuff is actually official and not a scam, ran a report that essentially said that 95% of all NFTs, that's 23 million people's NFTs, are now worthless. I mean, no one is surprised. I'm not surprised at all, because there are many reasons why this is. First off, NFTs were a blatant scam. Anything that asks you to essentially invest into something with the promise of gaining worth over time is a scam. It's a pyramid scheme. Why would you put your money down for something where you know you're not going to get your money back at the end of the day? And unlike something like Pokemon, for example, where there was, sentimental value and they never existed as a luxury item. Back in my day when I was a child, you bought a pack of Pokemon cards which contained about 10 cards for like £5. Granted, the price has gone up now. I still wouldn't consider them a luxury. Any child that gets pocket money or saves enough money can end up with 100 Pokemon cards. Any child who has, 10, 20, 50 pound can go and buy the rare cards on eBay. So unlike that, they were easy to collect. They were a toy to some regards. You traded them. Yeah, you could make the argument they were a kind of market in some sense, but Pokemon cards weren't created for that sense. They were created to trade. They were created to make money. They were created for children. They were created in collaboration and in partnership with artists. Artists drew those very famous illustrations like the Shiny Charizard and all them lot. There is an artistry to it. There is something to it. It wasn't just a piece of paper, much like how an NFT is, basically nothing. It's not tangible for the most part. I mean, NFTs are a bit of code attached to a slightly bigger bit of code. Like, my shiny Pokemon cards are unique. You can't physically touch your NFTs. They're not unique, especially when you talk about the meme of the board Yacht Club ape thing, where it was all just the same image done by one artist with just slight variations, and the artwork was not even relatively, it was awful for the most part. Yeah, they were just ugly. And this is the main reason why they didn't really catch on, because there was nothing to them. There was nothing special about them. And, obviously as time went on, people called them out for what they were for the most part. And also, a wise person summed up NFTs as, it's like you marry the woman you want, but everyone can have a go with her freely while you helplessly watch holding the marriage certificate in your hands. That was basically NFTs, because as people very quickly caught on, you can just screen cap someone's NFT, because these people would just post them online saying, oh, I just bought an NFT for like £25,000. It's going to be worth 75 in 3 years' time. And these people would get annoyed saying things like, oh, but you don't actually own my NFT, even if you screen cap it, or, you're stealing it. And it's like, come off your high horse, mate, for the most part. And yeah, it's bizarre. I mean, the whole situation was, and I mean, I have no sympathy for anyone who bought an NFT. You're a weak-minded sheep, in my opinion, especially celebrities, because they waste their money all the time on so many meaningless things, because their managers/handlers were the ones who said, you need to jump on this bandwagon. You need to, be a role model or get into this thing. I don't really necessarily know I do know the intent behind it, but I don't know what exactly the plan was, because I think the ultimate grand scheme was they really pushed this to celebrities or their handlers or whoever, and kind of said, this is going to be the next big thing. Fear of missing out, I think, is a term that I think they kind of push. South Park did a great episode kind of talking about how NFTs work and how people kind of get wrapped up in it, and promoted as this kind of thing and this kind of thing. A sense of false promise is what NFTs were kind of, I guess, presented to a lot of people, and a lot of people unfortunately fell for it, which is a bit of a shame, but you should kind of know better when you're getting into something that you literally don't know anything about. I mean, if I said, oh, the podcast is now, or if I started a new project and said, oh yeah, it's going to be a new project kind of similar to this podcast, but you have to pay me £50 for it and it doesn't exist, how many of you are giving me that £50? None of you, But maybe not the best example, but yeah, I think they will try and make a comeback because scams like this rarely die. They will kind of exist to some extent, but not as we know it as the scam it is, literally a bit of code attached to a picture. I think NFTs or Web3 or whatever you want to call it, it will probably get better integrated somewhere to some extent. It might just be a new form of organizing things or hiding information to some extent. I'm sure that's what its ultimate goal will be, much like with virtual reality, where you see with Meta, where they're really trying to push this as the next big thing, but people aren't interested because, one, the technology isn't there and it looks like trash. The metaverse / VR already exists and has found its place. It's in the VR chat. That is the, final destination, so to speak, of VR. It's never really going to be anything more than just a way for you to communicate and chat to people. It's not going to be, as some people seem to think or want it to be, we're all sitting at home, with our visors on, getting fat, not doing anything, and, advertisers and the higher powers that be all have us under control and slaves. They wish. Unfortunately for them, people are just a little bit too smart. People like me, people like you listening, we are above what they want in some sense. But I think I'm rambling about paranoia and tinfoil hat conspiracies. I think it's time to move on for the most part, as there's enough information out there on the internet for people to be very cautious and understand the dangers of the internet. So I'd say their goose is pretty much cooked for the most part. But let's move on to another trailer we're talking about in terms of media and media consumption. And that is going to be the fact that Amazon Prime will include ads from 2024, being next year. Now, I think given a lot of companies' subscription services have been increasing their prices. I recently talked about Sony's PlayStation Plus subscription increasing in price if you want to get the 3 packages specifically for the yearly purchase. I'm not quite sure what the terminology is behind that. Obviously, Netflix has increased its prices, as well as including an ad-free and ad version of it. Disney Plus has done the same, and now Amazon is doing it. And it just feels like follow the leader at this point, as unfortunately most people are struggling financially, and this is another reason, or Amazon is giving people another reason to just unsubscribe for them. I mean, recently I just unsubscribed to a bunch of things and I've saved myself a good amount of money, fortunately. Now, I'm going to give Amazon the benefit here when we read their post and looking at articles. It seems as though to watch Amazon Prime without ads is going to cost you, in our currency over here in the UK, an extra £2.50, which isn't too bad compared to others. When you look at Netflix, or if you look at, once again, the PlayStation subscription, and other people like Disney Plus is like had an egregious price hike, to the point where a lot of people just went, nope. But, $2.50, that's not too bad. I think a lot of people are probably going to look at that and go, oh, that's all right, I think that's okay, especially given what I'm going to go into in a minute. And they've also regarded these changes as limited advertisements, which hopefully means that this is going to be one ad during whatever you're watching. So I'm hoping that, let's say you're watching a 30-minute episode of a show, it then stops at the 15-minute mark for a 30-second ad, which may promote an Amazon Prime show or something else, or it's literally just a bunch of ads, or as many as they can cram in for 30 seconds. Like, I remember when I was in China a good few decades ago, watching their television, it may have changed, But when I was, watching their TV, when it did cut to a commercial break, a literal timer would appear on screen. And the adverts were probably about 6 seconds to 10 seconds long, and it would just go through as many advertisements as it could as possible. And once that timer hit 0, even if it was halfway between a advertisement, it would immediately cut back to the show. So maybe it'll be something like that to some extent. But it is an interesting situation, and they can flip it in their advantage, because if they advertise themselves as the cheap option compared to Netflix, compared to Disney Plus, they could win this quote unquote streaming wars in some sense. But at the same time, that being said, Amazon is a wealthy company. They can afford to not have ads on Amazon Prime, I'm pretty sure, not unless they aren't making as much money as they're telling us, which is another interesting thing. But at the end of the day as well, if you don't like ads, talk with your wallet. Talking with your wallet is one of the most powerful things we can do right now. Because if you just unsubscribe and don't be a hypocrite and comply and then complain about this, if enough people cancel Prime, they will be forced to remove ads or bring the price down. It's as simple as that. They're not going to listen to me. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to listen to people, to some extent, on Twitter. They're going to listen to where the money is. If they are losing money based on a decision they've made, they will change it. These people only talk and hear money. Yeah? That's the best way for us to get what we want. Don't like that game? Don't buy it. Don't like someone's practice? Don't talk about it to some extent, or don't buy into it. People need to realize this. This is why so many corporations and so many things have so much power over you, because you're not talking. But you know what? Whatever. 2 more trailers we have, and these are quite small ones, but very interesting ones at the same time. The first one is going to be, or I should say, the next one is going to be for Hotel Hazbin, the announcement trailer, which, speaking of Amazon Prime, this is going to be on Amazon Prime as a very interesting choice for A24 to be producing, which I knew about, but it's still surprising. This is like the first animated thing they've dipped their, I was about to say vocabulary. This is the first animated project they've ever produced for the most part. So obviously they're looking at potential and they have a lot of faith in this. I think this could be big. I guess for some context, out of the 2 VisiPop projects that are currently being made right now, I like Hell of a Boss over Hotel Hazbin. I didn't really gel with Hotel Hazbin, but that's not to say that I didn't like it. I thought the pilot was okay for the most part. It was well animated and it had a great concept, being that we are following the daughter of hell or Satan. I'm not quite sure. I know she's the daughter of the ruler of hell or whatever, and she believes that demons can be rehabilitated. They believe that they can change. I can't even say the word right now. They can, so essentially she opens up this hotel, which is sort of like a rehab for demons, to kind of prove that, yes, demons can change. Fantastic concept. I really like that. And the characters themselves are very interesting for the most part. In terms of the pilot itself, the direction didn't really work for me. And for the record, I don't really like the current direction of Hell of a Boss right now. I don't really like some of the things they are suggesting and doing or taking the story in a narrative way. Once again, I don't think it's bad. It's just I prefer the early episodes to what they're doing in the new episodes, to say the least. But ignoring the fandom drama and the controversy over the voice actors being changed from the pilot to this Amazon series, first impressions, it looks like a lot of fun. It's literally just a bunch of scenes with no context, so it's hard to tell what kind of show it's going to be, whether it's going to be good or bad or not. Who the hell knows right now? But yeah, I didn't see anything that made me want to watch it, other than for curiosity's sake, for the fact that the animation looks good, and for the sheer fact of its significance of being a YouTube animated series turned into a mainstream TV series, which is awesome. I honestly want to see more talented creators, especially on YouTube, Newgrounds, kind of make it big time. We've seen that in recent years, obviously, with things like Smiling Friends as such, which is a fantastic show if you haven't watched, or Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, or recently the horror film I talked about, Talk to Me. That was done by 2 YouTubers who made short horror films, and they've made a mainstream horror film, which, funny enough, A24 were the ones who produced and released it. It can happen. If A24 are going to be the kinds of people that continue to do this, I'm all for it. But yeah, no, the series, it looks fine. I do wonder if the series is still going to be raunchy, or are they going to tone it down for a wider audience? Because you want this show to succeed, and obviously changes are going to happen. I know that. I'm not going to be upset if things do change, but I do wonder if, someone has kind of said, hey, maybe turn down some of the more LGBTQ themings in the series, or maybe don't have characters do this or say that, or, that might be unappealing to this potential target audience we're looking at. Is there going to be a sort of, are they going to betray the core audience to appeal to people who, maybe just want a normal cartoon? Like, are they going to, I guess to some extent, instead of going, hey, we know you have an audience on YouTube, how about you try and appeal to this Adventure Time audience, to some extent, or this Rick and Morty audience, which is what so many people are trying to do right now with Lower Decks and other shows, and it's just awful for the most part. But I am very curious. I will probably give it a watch to some extent, because I do intend to watch as many animated things as possible this year. But yeah, I definitely wanted to talk about it and mention it as well. And I'm also going to put the original pilot for Hoto Hazbin in the description and download link if you haven't seen it, so you can obviously see it and be ready for the new season, or 2 seasons, because they've confirmed that not only is season 1 coming up, but season 2 is, which is interesting. I wonder if that's legitimate or not. And what I mean by that is people tend to lie about that kind of stuff where it's like a fake season 2 when realistically the episodes are already made. They just split it in half in order to give the audience and people the impression that more episodes have been made / the show has done so well that it's getting a second season. But yeah, last trailer we have is going to be a slightly more controversial one, and that is going to be for Rick and Morty Season 7, the official trailer. Our first look at the next season, which is starting very, very soon. I think it's next month. And yeah, let's get this out of the way. Yes, I like Rick and Morty. And no, it's not a show for smart people. Anyone can watch it. I do think it's a very accessible series. It is a comedy with sci-fi themings. Do not be put off by these idiots saying it's a smart show, or this or all that, or the memes or the jokes. Ignore that rubbish. Watch the show. Make your own mind up about it. Okay? You might like it, you might not like it, at least you know. But why am I talking about this series? Why am I talking about Season 7 when I've never ever really talked about any of the announcement trailers or reveal trailers for any of the seasons? Well, a couple months ago, allegations were made against one of the co-creators and the voice actor of the titular characters, which was a bit unfortunate for a lot of people and had a lot of people questioning what the ultimate fate of the series was going to be. The person themselves, being Justin Roiland, was promptly fired and replaced by Adult Swim, and here we are. We now have our first exposure to the new voice actors, and I'm going to say actors with a sort of quotation marks because at the time of recording, the voice actor or actors has not been confirmed. We do not know who is voicing Rick and Morty, which is interesting. We're not really going to find out possibly until episode 1 premieres and finishes and we see the title card. So I kind of know why they've done this, and I'm going to get into that reason in a bit. But so first thoughts. Listening to Rick and Morty, and I did listen to and watch the trailer a couple of times just to kind of make my own mind up about it, because I didn't want to look at anyone else's opinions on what they think of the new voices. But yeah, no, personally, I think they're nearly spot on when it comes to matching the characters' I can't even say the word. Idiolects, I think that's the word. I was struggling to kind of figure out what exactly you call it when a person talks a certain way or says certain words in a certain way, and I think that's the word. But I'm not going to repeat it again because I may be incorrect, but hopefully you guys know what I mean by that. Yeah, I think they've got a lot of the mannerisms and a lot of the sounds, cadences, whatever you call it, at times, like when Rick shouts, or when he like scrambles to find the right words, or when Morty whines, or when he stutters, it sounds exactly like the characters. But when the characters speak in a more normal dialect, it sounds like someone doing a decent impression without the consistency of how they normally sound. Like it sounds different. Like it honestly sounds like me talking how I am now, and then because I'm moving on to the next trailer, I'm then talking like this, and I didn't really like the trailer. You know what I mean? It sounds very different. It sounds like somebody else has taken over. It sounds like, a complete tone/mood change, which is a bit of a shame. But then again, this person or persons are replacing someone who is a master at doing those kinds of, kind of like ad-libs, like schizophrenic kind of, voices for the most part. So this voice actor, whoever they are, or voice actors, once again, they may not be used to kind of how Justin Roiland has been able to master that craft, so to speak, if it has a technical name or not. But yeah, I mean, I have to say, overall, they're doing a fantastic job reaching the right pitches and tones, and they just sound like the characters for the most part. It doesn't sound distracting to me. It might not sound distracting to people who aren't aware of the current situation going on with the series. Whoever they got, I think they picked the right person, because I've seen plenty of people attempt to do Rick and Morty's voice, and it hasn't sounded great. This is probably one of the best versions of them I think I've ever heard. So I guess kudos to Adult Swim for finding the right person, I guess. But we'll have to see at the end of the day. And I mean, they have the weight of the world on their shoulders right now. And when the new voice actor or the actors' names are revealed, do not harass them. Do not continue to give Rick and Morty fans, or any fan community for that matter, a worse name than it already has. This situation is complicated, and the person or persons voicing the characters may not care or know what is going on. Please just leave them alone. Be kind to them. They are clearly doing their best. If you don't like it, don't watch the show. If you do like it, continue to support the show. Be positive, because the current situation regarding this series could have cancelled the whole series. So just be thankful for what we've got at the end of the day. But looking at the series as a whole, based on the trailer, the animation, this season looks like fun, classic Rick and Morty adventures. I'm all for it. I think Rick and Morty has stayed roughly consistent for the most part, and hopefully this season is able to do that. It does seem like we are going to have a lot of fun and, just silly random adventures with this season. And I'm generally excited to see what they do with this season. It's now in its 7th season, which is crazy to think that a show has lasted this long, because typically shows like Rick and Morty don't last that long. Obviously, a lot of its copycats have kind of lasted for a while, like Star Trek Lower Decks or the god-awful Velma series that are just blatant rip-offs of Rick and Morty. Those shows are bleeding money. In case you're wondering, they are not particularly popular, and they're not particularly well done, and they're not particularly well liked. So yeah, that's pretty much going to be the podcast for the most part. It has just become October, and typically with October we do some more spooky Halloween themed stuff. As it's so early, I'm not doing it for this episode, but I have a few discussions lined up for the next 2 podcasts, because we are going to be able to do 2 podcasts this month, which is awesome. I want to get a few people on this episode because discussions in terms of Halloween are always fun. So I'm currently working on that. So hopefully that will happen. I don't want to just be on my own when it comes to doing these discussions. But to kind of get us into the Halloween October season, the video of the episode is going to be from Flying Lotus with Requisite, which is done. I didn't manage to write down the name of the artist who did this music video, but he's done a couple music videos in his very interesting style. And I think this music video is gross, disgusting, very unfortunate, and I think it does sum up my thoughts and feelings on the world and society and other things and that. So hopefully you enjoy that. If you've never listened to Flying Lotus, go listen to the rest of his music, because he's one of the best producers out there right now. And yeah, I guess there isn't too much else to say about anything I've talked about. Hopefully you've liked the new structure or style of me kind of focusing more on news as opposed to just trailers. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. If you made it all the way here, I really appreciate you deciding to listen to this podcast, because you have the option of so many podcasts out there right now. So I really, really appreciate it. A like would be awesome. Subscribing would be awesome. And yeah, I guess I will end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.